Hey everybody, good evening to you. I hope you are all very well. So as promised, we're going to do a bit of a discussion about tools that I am moving on, and I'm not necessarily moving these things on because they are bad, it's just simply I'm not using them. So here we've got a Clifton 5.5 bench plane, and Clifton have been what you would call a premium plane maker for some time, but they've gone through a bit of an evolution. They're now owned by a different company, and the Cliftons that you can buy these days look a little bit different. This is the original version. So what differs is the handles are now walnut. My assumption is these are probably Bubinga. The lever cap now has a brushed finish on it. The colour of the new ones is grey. The blades on the new ones are a cryogenically O1 treated steel with a laser etching instead of this stamp, and the cap iron, which we'll see in a minute, is now a one-piece design rather than the two. So quite a bit going on there. My hunch is with the Bubinga side of things being changed out, that's probably to do with CITES stuff, shipping stuff around the world. Walnut not being an endangered species probably makes that darn sight easier. The colour, I've got to be honest, again, makes no difference to the performance, but I think the new grey looks better. Obviously that's a personal preference, but I think the green can look a bit like a Victorian traction engine, but you know, that's just personal preference. And also the highly polished surfaces, that's okay, but I think the brushed is a better, classier look. Again, this is all nonsense. It doesn't affect how the plane works. So we'll just have a delve further inside, and it's just secured with a conventional lever cap. And here's where we have the slightly differing design. So Clifton carried on this two-piece lever cap concept for quite some time, which was copied from the record stay set design. The idea being is that you just take off this nose piece, you then sharpen up your plane iron, remove the burr, and you just pop that one straight back on, so you don't have to unscrew the back here. Concept was also that it wouldn't put any bending forces onto the cutting iron, so it wouldn't quote unquote chatter. But I think chatter is the straw man of planes generally. There's always a million and one reasons why the plane that you have won't chatter. Every manufacturer thinks they've got it sorted, but quite well, in my opinion anyway, the normal Stanley Bailey is quite happy not chattering as long as you know how to use it. Clifton did get some criticism during this time about some quality control issues. I think you can find that kind of stuff on the internet, but to be quite honest, considering some of the challenges they had when they first set up, which was flooded factories and other such things, that's not really too much of a surprise. But now, I mean, that was a decade or more ago, I'm not sure exactly, but the modern stuff is pretty much flawless, and you're going to have good customer backup. Some of the things that were criticised, and you can see on this one that this stamp is not central in the blade or the cutting iron, that bugged people. For me, it doesn't really bother me too much. This is a hand forged iron, it's put in a machine, a stamp comes down, bang, and it was all done by hand rather than jigged for perfection. And that kind of thing doesn't bother me personally. I'm much more concerned about how it works. They come with super thick cutting irons. Again, that's a trend that's been very much revived. We were very happy with the Stanley concept for many years, but with the more premium brands coming back into the market, they kind of wanted to offer something a little bit different. Now, you might be forgiven for thinking, well, my God, did Clifton get it really wrong to start off with? Did they, with all these changes, colour, timber choice, whatever else, did they get it dreadfully wrong? I genuinely don't think they did. I think if you look at most of the manufacturers, I might have this wrong, and if there's any Lie-Nielsen fanboys out there, feel free to update me. But I think Lie-Nielsen started off with a W1 cutting iron. They now use their A2. I think they also started out with Bubinga. They now use North American Cherry, as far as I'm aware. So there's some changes there. And Veritas, they had their kind of standard bench planes, which I've had a little bit of experience with, but not really my cup of tea because I'm not so keen on the Norris style adjusters. And then they've kind of switched over to more of the kind of bevel up and the custom planes that they do. So I think Clifton, the actual nuts and bolts of the plane, the foundation has stayed pretty much the same. It's just really window dressing that's changed. One thing that I think Clifton really score on, and compared to the bedrocks put out by Lie-Nielsen and by Wood River, pretty much this whole platform, there isn't much to criticise because it's broadly everybody's take on what Stanley and Record and Miller's Falls and all these other people were chucking out for years. It's kind of a casting put together in a fairly familiar format. But this lateral adjustment lever, I think, is really nicely done. The main reason being is that on your Lie-Nielsens and your Wood Rivers and whatnot, you have this lever which is fabricated where you've got two little screws that join onto a brass tab. Now, I did have a plane where that tab started to become loose, and that can't happen if it's all in one. So if I was paying money, I'd much rather have that as one piece, and that's something that's always going to get used all the time. Movement, 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 movement. So for me, I know you could, if that gets loose, you could epoxy those screws in, but I think a plane that doesn't have that all in one is a little bit ropey. Sounds a bit harsh, but again, here there's a Record there that's done the same way. It's all in one. The Cliftons are a bedrock design, and what's quite nice with the Clifton as well is they didn't just completely copycat anyone else's trade dress. You can tell that this is very much a conventional metal plane that we're all familiar with, but it's very easy to see and say that's a Clifton. It's got the Clifton name on it, that's great, but they kept with the swept sides of the Baileys and the early bedrocks, and fair play to them for doing that. The frog looks uniquely them as well. Some of you might think, oh gosh, the frog mating area looks different. If we compare it to a Record 5.5, you can see that it looks like there's more surface area up here, and if you are going to be listening to salesmen and people of that nature, they might start convincing you that all this surface area is really important. It's not. It makes absolutely no difference at all. The frog on this is perfectly well designed to do a brilliant job. It's not going to cause you any problems whatsoever, so you can relax about that. One of the big things that's changed, and I think it's been in a sort of post-COVID world, is the cost of these so-called premium planes. Now, I'm not sure what it's like globally, but if you wanted to get the Lie-Nielsen version of one of these, I think in the UK at the minute, if they're even in stock, you're looking to pay about £540, and the Clifton is now £350. And from my perspective, that makes it a no-brainer, really. I would, if I was going to spend for expensive planes, I would go for the Clifton. There is obviously the option for, in the UK, you have them called Quangsheng, which is pretty much just Wood River, comes out of the same factory, I'm thinking, in China, and they look very similar to the Lie-Nielsen concept, which is something modelled very closely after the bedrock design in its appearance. So the cost these days is something that really goes with the Clifton, and I am also relieved with the Clifton these days that they have now adopted the one-piece cap iron, which, a lot of people are going to be maybe fans of that, but I think having a one-piece is much more user-friendly for getting a reliable setting here close to the front edge. This two-piece never really caught on. I don't think it's particularly important, and I do applaud Clifton for taking that step of just putting it back and keeping it simple and just having it in a one piece. So yeah, I could now just do lots of kind of ridiculous shavings for you to enjoy being peeled off, but ultimately it's not really going to tell you very much. A lot of people start getting their straight edges out and feeler gauges to try and prove to you how wonderful these tools are. One of the best tests I think you can do if you buy a good quality plane is to edge joint something. So put something in your vise and edge joint it. If you can edge joint properly, it's going to be flat enough. That might not be good enough for some of you out there. You might need to get your starrets on it and whatever else, but that's been my kind of test that I've always gone to. Should you get one? Should you feel pushed in the direction to get one of these? That's entirely up to you. The nice thing is always if you buy something new that if you've got a problem you can return it, but these things are relatively simple things. They shouldn't be too far out of whack. I haven't got the cutting iron in this one right now, but to be quite honest, you can still pick up just Records and Stanleys for maybe 50 quid, yeah, you're probably going to have to buy some abrasive and a few other things to just tidy them up. I personally prefer the lighter weight of the Bailey compared to things like the Clifton and the Lie-Nielsen because of their added weight. If you're not using a plane a great deal, you're not going to notice the difference that much. If you're mainly using your plane after the wood has been completely prepared, it's not going to matter. I'll be quite honest, I found it quite nice on the shooting board because of the mass. If you're kind of just trimming through, but ideally you don't want to have to use a shooting board too much. You want to be cutting to the line as accurately as you can and just doing the minimal of cleaning up possible. But, your choice is yours. But I think the Clifton now, the biggest thing it's got going for it is it's a very competitive price here in the UK. I think £350 obviously isn't cheap, and in today's world where money seems short for a lot of us, that does seem expensive. But if you're in the UK and you're looking at a Lie-Nielsen and you're thinking, wow, 540 quid, the Lie-Nielsen is great. They've got an enviable reputation, but I just cannot see the point of spending the extra money on it. Yeah, and I need to make a packing box to send this to the next person. And again, the only reason I'm selling it is that I don't need to be collecting this object. The record that I've got there, I feel happy actually using. I feel a little bit, not that I should, but almost a bit precious about this item. The ergonomics of it, you can see that it's a little bit different. You see the record here has got the higher knob, a little bit lower up front on this one. The handle is a little bit more upright on the Clifton than it is on your kind of typical Bailey. Just as a bit of a contrast, I've got an early Stanley number 8. You can see that's a lower one, and so it's a bit more traditional with the early Stanley proportions there. But the handle is quite a lot more upright. It's not as broom handle-esque as the early Veritas models. It's plenty comfy enough. And I've not had any issues using it. If you've got really used to a traditional Bailey shape handle, you might find it an issue, but I severely doubt it. You would have to be a very, very keen amateur doing a lot of planing to notice that. So yeah, if you see one for second hand, go for it. I sold this one, I think it was for £230. That seems reasonable enough to me. I think they're a decent plane made by a decent company, and it's nice to be able to support a UK company now without thinking you need to buy Lie-Nielsen, because you just save a bunch of money by going Clifton.